starting now.
One of the things that we didn't really talk about on Friday's show, but it's one of those kind of feelings that we get during this time of the year. It's like you look so forward to the draft, and you're kind of like, I got to wait until, August now. You know what I mean? Now I'm stuck in like an old football. But the NFL is so good. During the draft, did you see they released like a teaser trailer, and it's like, coming soon, schedule release day. And
exactly.
It's like
they're already up and running with the promotion for the next.
And I literally was like, in my head, I was like, oh, fuck yeah, schedule release day. Like, let's go.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, when do I get the Packers? Like, let me have them. Let me have them. So it is funny, the draft is behind us now, but the NFL does such a good job. Even though this summer is packed with things, we're in the heart of the NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs. The Suns just got swept. You got all of these big storylines that could lead shows, but the NFL is like, no, not so fast. I don't care that the Olympics. I don't care the Olympics are coming. Schedule release day on coming. I think next month or end of May, sometime in May. I can't remember exactly what it is.
I don't even remember when the exact date was, but yeah. No,
we'll start getting the leaks. You know what I mean? We already got the leaks of when certain teams are playing, certain games in certain countries. And, we got the Mexico game now with Philly and the Packers on Friday night of the opening weekend. So we'll continue. Yeah. Schefter always does that like the day or two before, things will start leaking. So that's coming. It's coming.
Yeah. And then right after that, they'll, I'm sure, be pumping up the top 100 players of 2023 in there. So, yeah, more and more content to come from the NFL. But here we are on a Monday after the NFL draft. It is in its entirety. It has been completed. Teams have also signed their undrafted free agents to contracts. So we've got rosters filling out here for the summer ahead of OTAs, training camp, all of that stuff. But we're going to be looking back on this past weekend, looking at the entire draft, selecting some teams we thought were winners, some teams we thought were losers of the draft, and kind of where we see some of the early narratives forming in terms of offseason, preseason, all of that stuff. So excited to get into it. A look back on the 2024 NFL Draft. Some housekeeping as of note before we get into the winners and losers of the draft. The Jacksonville Jaguars expectedly picked up the fifth-year option on Trevor Lawrence. They also picked up the fifth-year option on running back Travis Etienne. I guess that wasn't too much of a surprise either, especially with that cost of the fifth-year option for running backs being, more and more reasonable compared to quarterbacks, of course, and even wide receivers. Although, given his career so far, Etienne has been, flashy as expected, but also at times a bit underwhelming, I'd say, Mark. Yeah. So that was the one where it's like, I don't know if they'll pick it up. Maybe they won't, but they go ahead and do that and ink those guys to deals before the summer gets going, and they'll have those guys for another year and a half.
Yeah, no, I'm all for it. I mean, when Etienne is able to get going as a part of that offense, the Jags win. I mean, it's just it's a whole different looking offense, and it's about making sure Trevor is successful this year and making sure that everyone around him is happy and there's no drama going into camp, and that certainly getting those things done and picked up, it helps with that. I also would argue just the fact that when you look back at that draft, taking two guys in the first round like that, it kind of also picking up the fifth-year option helps validate the reason of why you did that, right? Because you want to control for the fifth year, and that's all part of it. Now, good news for Jags fans, I think, overall. Now can Etienne and Trevor just stay healthy and have a really productive season? They both could end up with some nice contracts if they're able to do that. That's the the next step in the evolution of this saga with the Jags for sure.
Yeah, we'll see if the Jags get mentioned here on the winners or losers list today.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the Patriots signed defensive tackle Christian Barmore to the largest Patriots contract not named Tom Brady in the team history. 4-year deal worth $92 million, 41.8 guaranteed. Yeah. this was, I thought, a smart move, especially with Gerard Mayo taking over. You want someone that can help anchor the defense, especially defensive line.
Definitely.
To get you started. They've got holes galore throughout this roster. And so to be able to, keep your good players on the team, kind of a no-brainer. And Christian Barmore, obviously, very, very talented and a homegrown player, one that they drafted. So
investing in him and investing in that position group, it makes a ton of sense for where the Patriots are at and trying to grow this thing now, kind of grassroots, again, rebuild from the ground up. It's a smart move for sure.
Yeah, the Philadelphia Eagles, a much lesser known story is that they signed offensive tackle Mekhi Becton, the former first-round pick by the New York Jets, the offensive tackle. The Philadelphia Eagles signing him to a $5.5 million deal. So, Jets drafts in recent memory haven't yielded too many great results, and Becton was certainly one that they had high hopes for, and he is moving on. He's got a new home. Finally, though, to circle back to the Patriots, we were speaking about the contract, comparing it to Tom Brady. Tom Brady is going to be on Netflix coming up pretty soon. They're doing the roast of Tom Brady on May 5th. I'm actually really excited for it. I've been a big fan of like the Comedy Central roast and things like that. So hopefully this will be very similar. But a few that are listed to attend this roast are Randy Moss, Julian Edelman, Drew Bledsoe, and of course Rob Gronkowski. So that's
that's awesome.
Right. I haven't heard any other names floated around. I really hope they get Peyton Manning there because that guy just kills it. I think he's been to one or two roasts before, and obviously being Tom Brady's like arch nemesis throughout his career, that'd be just great television.
I will definitely have to. I'll be on a beach in Mexico when that debuts. But I'll download it at the hotel to watch on the plane ride back for sure. That'd be easy plane watching. You know what I mean? Easy plane watching for sure. I love that Brady is being, again, ever since he went to Tampa, we just get this side of him now and this access to him that has just been really, really cool and really great. And I think it's shown off his personality and leading in well again to him being on Fox. And we're going to see a lot of him and hear a lot of him. So just being able to like come out here, let's get the jokes out of the way. Let's have some fun. And then, kind of start this new career for himself. I think it's all good for us as kind of football fans. And I can't wait, really, really can't wait to hear him on the broadcast.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be, he's going to knock it out of the park. I think it'll be the biggest disappointment if Tom Brady somehow isn't good at this job. But I think
especially with how good Greg Olsen is, that if he's got to at least be as good as Greg Olsen, which is a tall order. But honestly, even if his personality is not as good as Greg's, just like the stories,
the intellect.
And the intellect, just lean on that. Like football fans are smarter than ever before. You don't need to be dumb guy. Like it's one of the things that Tony Romo, I think, why we liked him at first was because he just kind of was like, I don't know, and talking off the cuff, and like predicting things. And then it got old because it's like, all right, I want more than that. Give me more of the intelligence speak. And now Tony gets ripped for his like, he says something and it's like so dumb. And it's like, Tony, even I know that. I'm sitting on my couch and you're wrong. Like when he was doing the Bears game last year and he was talking about how great Luke Getsy is and how Luke Getsy's turned around this offense, and every single Bears fan like, have you watched anything? You know what I mean? Have you watched? So I don't think that Tom will let things like that slide and slip, which is going to be exciting. I know also we wanted to make sure give a well wishes and a get well soon to Tank Dell. I don't know what happened around it. Was it an accidental like kind of chart, or was he in like a robbing? Like what happened with the story? I don't know. I just saw Tank Dell got shot, but he's okay. And I didn't look too much into it.
You kind of know as much as I do. He was outside somewhere and there were other people that were involved that were injured in this incident too. Yeah. So I don't know what the specifics of it are.
He's lucky.
I do know that the release by the Houston Texans was that, he was shot, but he's okay. He was discharged from the hospital, not too long after. And, he's expected to be, a full recovery and be perfectly fine. So it seems like in terms of like the on-field stuff,
maybe wrong place, wrong time type of thing.
Yeah.
Not, again, it's just it'll never, ever, ever cease to amaze me that these guys with these bright futures and their whole lives ahead of them sometimes just put themselves in the dumbest of dumb places and decisions. The Rashee Rice thing is just another great example.
Right.
Hopefully Tank Dell. I mean, listen.
It sounds like this one was
there's
kind
also
of like not. He didn't really have much to do with it, but we don't know. So
yeah, and there's also we do live in a country now where mass shootings happen all the time. So there is the idea of a wrong place, wrong time mentality, but we'll wait and see exactly all the details around it. But yeah, well wishes to speedy recovery to Tank Dell, because he had such an exciting rookie year last year, and ready, very, very ready to see what him and that Texas team do in year 2.
Yeah, and obviously, he went down with injury too, so his fantastic season was cut short. It, would just be another devastating
in the playoffs.
He had to miss his sophomore season and try and build upon that performance. So yeah, hopefully he's doing well in his recovery, and hopefully everybody else involved is okay as well. All right, Mark, we each decided that we will pick 5 teams to spotlight, good or bad, in terms of how we view their draft. To avoid any overlap in this particular instance, Mark is going to take NFC and I'll take AFC. So I've picked 5 AFC teams. He's picked 5 NFC teams to spotlight.
Will your team make the list? Yes.
That's right. You'll have to wait to find out. And we'll, have this pulled up here so that you can follow along. If you're watching on YouTube, we'll pull up the list of these teams' draft picks so you can kind of see what we're talking about as we're kind of going through this. Mark, I will let you go first. Who is your first NFC team that you would like to spotlight after the 2024 draft?
One of the things I thought about, just to give our listeners kind of a peek into my brain and how I assess a draft and things like this, I'm never going to give a grade, right? It's just, to me, that's the dumbest thing. It's so hard to figure out that's an A. But I will say, to me, what impresses me, because once you get past really the second, third round, there's sometimes you see a name like, Blake Corum, I know that name, or Spencer Rattler, I know that name. But let's be honest, unless you are a draft guru, you're not, you don't know these guys' stats. You don't know their, all the ins and outs. So what I look at is, did you fill needs going into the draft that you had? Did you fill them within the first 4 rounds? Because historically, you're going to find your starters and your difference makers in 1 through 4. Very rarely do you get the Puka Nakuas, 6-rounder, those outlier guys. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 4th rounder. So
in fact, I think you're way more likely to get a starter undrafted than you are to get a late round pick.
Yeah, it's weird in that way. It's just weird in that way.
What is it? 40% of the league, or over 50% of the league is undrafted, right?
I don't know if it's that high, but it's a portion. It's a good portion.
Yeah.
And I will say, so that's kind of what I look at. And then also quantity. We know, the numbers bear out. 50% of your draft picks will probably flame out within 2-3 years. So then 25% of your draft picks are going to be quality players that you're a fan of your team's going to get to know and be okay, no, they're a quality player. And then less than, then there's that 25%. He's that's a starter. That's a or a high level player. So the more picks you have, the more chances on you've hit gold with the lottery, right? I take that into account. So that's where I want to start. And I want to start in Arizona. Arizona had 3 giant needs coming into this: corner, edge, and wide receiver. In their draft, they were able to fill all of those things within their first 3 picks, 2 of them in the first round, 1 in the second round. And obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. alone, to me, is the most can't miss prospect in this whole draft. So that bodes well too. When you look at Arizona's draft too, look at how many in rounds 4 through 1 through 4. That is, they have 8 players in 1 through 4. So the numbers bearing on out, they're probably going to end up with, even if you exclude Marvin Harrison Jr., 4 quality players, almost guaranteed. And that doesn't add in the fact that you then have 2 5th-rounders, a 6 and a 7. So maybe one of those guys hit 2. Arizona's a team that needed a lot of youth. They needed to fill a lot of holes. They had 12 picks. And then again, 8 in the first 4 rounds. It's just a huge quantity for them to hit on. Also, I like Benson out of Florida State. I think getting that running back in the 3rd round is great. The 2 players from Illinois, I actually got to watch more Illinois games this year, and I really like the tackle Adams. I think he could be a quality starter in this league, or definitely like a swing tackle guy. And then you add in the fact that the Rutgers corner, Melton, Darius Robinson, the edge rusher out of Missouri, who I think has got a huge upside. And then Marvin Harrison Jr., who I think is 0 bust potential. He'll be a quality starter at worst. I think Arizona deserves credit. They win in with a ton of picks. They got their needs, boom, 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 off the board, and then took a lot of kind of best player available for a roster that just needs talent. And so kudos to Arizona. I think they deserve a shout out in this recap episode.
I agree. They were one of those early teams that, as it was unfolding, I was like, wow, I think they're nailing this early portion of the draft, and they're probably going to end up being one of those highly graded teams.
4 third-round picks.
They definitely did. Yeah.
4 third-round picks, and they didn't reach too much. They stayed within the Power 5. Florida State running back, an offensive tackle, and a tight end from Illinois. And the kid Ryman, the tight end from Illinois, a lot of people saying, well, he didn't start much, and his stats were really low, but he's one of those guys that you just look at the physical build. He could end up being a great NFL player and a terrible college player, because Illinois is not exactly a prolific passing offense. And he's a guy with all the raw tool skills, the 40 time, the cone drill, all that stuff that just flashes. You're like, oh, wait a minute. This guy could end up being a real player. Plus the other corner from Boston College. You get ACC corners, an ACC running back, Big Ten corner, Big Ten offensive lineman, and obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. and an SEC edge rusher. They stuck to Power 5 schools at positions of need, and they have and they got a lot of guys. So kudos to Arizona.
Yeah, seriously, I had to widen out the screen a little bit so I could try and
12
picks that they made into this one screen. So yeah, kudos to them. Great draft by the Arizona Cardinals. All right, I'm going to get this one out of the way. Everyone's probably expecting that this is coming. I'm going to pick for the AFC teams. It's not letting me continue to go down the list here. What the heck? I'm picking the Pittsburgh Steelers. We can get to their list here eventually.
There you go.
So what? No, it's still not. What
you had it for a second. You had to make it a full.
This is crazy.
It's ending in New Orleans now.
We gotta. Yeah, look, it's not even. I've pulled it full screen now, and it's not even letting me pick it. Well, that's unfortunate. Don't know what happened there.
I'll pull up Pittsburgh on my own screen to look at.
What's that?
I'm pulling up Pittsburgh on my own screen to look at, just to get those names, see what you got here.
There you go. But yeah, Pittsburgh ends up with 7 selections in this draft, and I like you mentioned, I agree that we can't really predict much in terms of the late round picks, how they're going to pan out. That's just really not how it goes in the NFL. And so what you do is you assess those early picks and say, did they address those positions of need? And they really did. The Steelers, they got lucky by many estimations early on in terms of them being able to get, here we go, Troy Fautanu out of Washington. A lot of people expected him to be gone inside the top 15. Pittsburgh actually, in one of their videos of him making the phone call, you can hear one of the assistant coaches in the background say 7 at 20. So that would imply that maybe they had Troy Fautanu ranked at number 7 on their board to get him at 20 there. So that gives you a little insight on what Pittsburgh thinks of him. But awesome to get those bookends, as we talked about on Friday, and then to turn around and get Zach Frazier, who was one of those top 3 centers that we said, if you're a center needy team, you got to get Jackson Powers Johnson, Graham Barton, or Zach Frazier. The fact that they didn't have to trade up to take him there, they get him at 51 overall, was pretty impressive. So getting Zach Frazier out of West Virginia addressed those two offensive line needs right out the bat. And that is the rebuild is complete now for the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive line. And this is clearly them leaning into the Arthur Smith offense. I mean, this is them saying we are going to attack teams at the line of scrimmage, run the football. So there's nobody happier than Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren about these two first selections. And then I was excited for them to go and get a wide receiver out of Michigan like Roman Wilson, who, was still one of those guys who maybe he would have snuck his way into the early second round, maybe even late first, had this been a, wide receiver dry class. Guy that never dropped passes. I think he had 3 drop passes in his, last 2 years, and was a touchdown machine for the Wolverines on a national championship winning team. So really like that with Deontay Johnson out. They needed to get reinforcements there. I was a little bit surprised that they went inside linebacker this early in the 3rd round, but Peyton Wilson, and now since the pick has come out, has been considered a steal by many because he was potentially the best inside linebacker in this class. There were injury questions, but he's getting a lot of comps to Luke Kuechly. Look, that'd be amazing if he could pan out to be 50% of what Luke Kuechly was. But they had him rated super high, and so they went and took him. Went back to the offensive line in the 4th round, and then what was really cool for me was they go back to Iowa, another Big Ten program that they love, to take defensive tackle Logan Lee. And I actually covered him in high school. He went to Orion High School, and I covered his pretty much 3-year high school career when I was in the Quad Cities doing reporting there. So I've done many interviews with him. I had tons of film from his high school days. He played tight end and defensive end, and he was a mammoth there at Orion High School. So it's really cool to have covered him and now get to root for him on Sunday. So pretty sweet. But yeah, like we talked about, they addressed a lot of needs. They rounded it out with a corner in the late 6th round. The only want that I didn't get out of this draft class was one of those top end corners that I would have loved for them to address in the first 3 rounds. But last year they got 2 corners that they felt really good about that both got injured in training camp, didn't get to play all year. So I think they're maybe hoping that those 2 guys who are healthy now will help, be opposite Joey Porter Jr. and pan out. But overall, this was an offensive line driven class, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, I don't think that's a homer pick. I think Pittsburgh had a really solid draft. I mean, you look at what they did with the offensive line in the first 2 picks. It's not sexy, but it is one of those things that it absolutely is positions of need, and they need to have a strong offensive line and offensive line depth in that division, especially if you're hoping that you're going to be able to discover who could maybe be your quarterback for the next couple of years as you're going into a season that, could be ripe with quarterback controversy. The last thing you want is just, whoever's better with this terrible offensive line. You want a good offensive line, and then to say, all right, well, this guy is balling out and he's getting protection and it's working. So I agree with you. Pittsburgh belongs on this list.
I'm very interested to see what they do with Fetanu because he's a pure left tackle, but so was Broderick Jones. They moved Broderick Jones to the right, and they've said they want to get him back on the left side. But now they've got 2 left tackles. They'll have to figure out who they're going to play on either side. But good problem to have for Pittsburgh.
Good problem to have.
Who you got?
Someone will make an adjustment. I'm going to go all the way to the East Coast to another team that I don't think I realized going into the draft they had as much depth as they did, as amount of picks in the first 3 rounds as they ended up making. The Washington Commanders. They had 6 picks in the first 3 rounds, and they were able to get not only the quarterback Jaden Daniels, who again was my QB2 on this list, but you then look at Newton getting him in the top of the 2nd round, the defensive tackle from Illinois. He's a guy that many of us projected first rounder. So getting him in the 2nd round is great value. And the fact of the matter is they are a team that, like Arizona, you just need starters all over the place. And even if you hit with 3 or 4 of these guys, getting 6 picks, I think Luke McCaffrey in the 3rd round is kind of like a go-to slot guy for your young quarterback, a trustworthy Hunter Renfrow type. makes a lot of sense. Also, I like that they go with the tight end out of Kansas State, Sanat. Again, big body, can block, big red zone target. So you give your young quarterback a tight end and maybe a slot wide receiver within those first 3 rounds. They not only got their quarterback, they found a couple people that you could say, all right, we're also going to make sure he's got some young weapons to kind of grow with, to give him some extra help besides it just being a scary Terry show with Terry McLaurin all next year. And then you add in the corner from Michigan and the defensive tackle Newton from Illinois, 2 guys who I expect to be starters for them almost day one. A really solid draft for Washington. You then look at it overall, again, a bevy of picks as well. Beyond that, having a fifth, 2/5, and a 7th rounder as well. And, taking kind of a project linebacker in McGee from Temple, plus the safety and the from Washington and the edge rusher out of Notre Dame, John Baptiste, who, again, raw talent, but you
work with them.
Yeah. You work with them, and you hope with your defensive head coach and Dan Quinn can kind of like maybe get those guys to become a rotational pieces, or maybe bottom line starters, or a starter a year or 2 from now, depending on how they develop. So I thought a solid draft from Washington. Jane Daniels obviously being the superstar in it, but getting Newton, it feels like they got 2 first rounders. You know what I mean?
It does.
Feels like they did. People are praising Minnesota for like, oh my God, the top edge, and they got a quarterback. I like the quarterback. Washington got a lot, and the defensive player they got, I have him as basically the same grade as the one that Minnesota got. So I'm going to give them that kind of benefit of the doubt of almost getting 2 first rounders.
Yeah, and I love the Mike Sainristil pick as well. It was a deep corner class. He probably would have been a first rounder if this was last year's draft or next year's draft. So, to your point, they got instant starters, and they have Cole Turner there at tight end. So Ben Sinnott doesn't have to be the guy right out of the gate, but they can utilize him in 12 personnel and kind of roll him out there, get him acclimated, because we know, tight end is a difficult position to transition to at the NFL level. But yeah, quality job by the Washington Commanders, and really a wide array of positions addressed in this one. I'm going to go to a team that I think had a similar type of draft to Washington. A lot of picks and addressing a lot of different needs. That's kind of, for me, the Buffalo Bills. Really liked. We mentioned it. I wasn't crazy about them trading out of the first round to then go and not only let their arch nemesis pick ahead of them, but then trade again back out of the first round. But they did acquire some extra picks out of the deal, and they still got Keon Coleman, who I'm a big fan of. I like that pick. I like the fit there. I would have liked a second wide receiver earlier in this draft, but in terms of just the array of talent that they were able to get, for a team as talented as Buffalo, they did have a lot of needs too. They were a team that could really fill a lot of holes in their offense and defense through this draft, and I think they did that. Cole Bishop is the guy that will start for them. Dwayne Carter, I think, is a guy that will start for them early. And then I really liked their 4th round pick in Ray Davis out of Kentucky, because James Cook certainly came along as the season went on, and he's a talented running back, but what we've seen throughout the league is way more 2-back type of tandems throughout, and Ray Davis perfectly complements what James Cook does. This is a great goal line back for them, and will fill that role that they were hoping, Damian Harris was going to be able to take over and things like that. But Ray Davis, I think, is a good option there. And then they get, outside of those top 3 centers, Cedric Van Granger out of Georgia was one of those that considered to be in the next tier, is just like fell all the way here to the 5th. So I think they addressed a lot of needs. They get linebacker, edge, tackle late in the draft too. They really it was a grab bag of positional talent that the Buffalo Bills went after. And so overall, as a totality, I liked it. And would have liked them to get like an Adonai Mitchell or something like that with their 1st round pick, or even a Xavier Worthy, but happy with Keon Coleman, and I like what they addressed here.
And anytime you get a player from England and you're taking him in the 7th round, this guy, Travis Clayton. Clayton is a former soccer and rugby player who's a member of the International Pathway Program. He's a developmental prospect, but he ran a 4.79 40 at 307 pounds intriguing skill set. So you bring this guy and you just say to yourself, hey, we don't want him to go to, we're just going to take our 7th round pick and claim this physical freak who now wants to play football and just teach him and be like, all right, let's get him into our system and kind of go from there.
Absolutely.
He may flame out, but it also is just fun, intriguing when you're like, hey, did they have a good draft? I don't know. They might have found an absolute steal and a kid that in a year or two from now.
You don't know too much about these guys.
Yeah.
And as a reminder, this every team has to fulfill the league's initiative in incorporating international players. Every team, I think the deadline is today or sometime early this week to have at least one international player on your team. So we saw a lot of undrafted free agents among those lists were one of these guys. They take them here in the 7th round, but definitely intriguing. And I love that initiative. So liking to see that grow more and more each year.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. I'm going next to the Detroit Lions, and I only really want to talk about like 2 things. They also did the British Columbia guy, the offensive tackle in the 4th round. And again, that's maybe
6 picks for them.
Yeah, that's maybe a little bit of a reach, but again, Detroit's got a really solid offensive line, so maybe you say to yourself, hey, we're going to take a little bit of a risk on this.
I wonder if they thought this was Manu Ginobili. Maybe that's
not instead of Giovanni Manu. Yes. But I really want to focus on, this is actually a shared pick. So I'm going to talk about 2 teams here, but this is a shared pick. So it's actually Detroit and Philadelphia because they did the same thing. Detroit went out and got 2 of the top 5 corners in Tyrion Arnold and Rakestraw Jr., who Rakestraw was in our mock draft as a number 1. And then what did Philadelphia do? Philadelphia did the same exact thing. If you go to Philly's draft, the first 2 picks, Quinyon Mitchell, Toledo, who is our number 1 corner, and then Cooper DeJean. So both Philly and Detroit had gigantic, I don't even care about the rest of their drafts. They had gigantic needs at corner the back end. And they both just said, fuck it. We're just going to draft corners, first 2 picks. And they both ended up 4 of the top 7 corners in the draft ended up in Philadelphia and Detroit. And both of these teams, too, if you look at their divisions, needing good, strong corner play. And both of these teams, playoff teams, one was in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, one was in the NFC Championship game last year, who say, hey, we don't need to mess around with this. We just got to fill this gaping need. They both did it with absolute studs in Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean. One of them will hit for each team, right? So you've basically guaranteed you got yourself a lockdown corner. So I'm giving a shared spot to the Philadelphia Eagles and the Detroit Lions in this spot for me. They just like monopolized the corner market in this draft for themselves. And I think it was a brilliant move by both teams to do it.
Both of these defenses were really good last year. And so this is going to be a terrifying unit.
That was the only weak spot on Philly and Detroit was the corners can't cover anyone.
That was the big thing. And definitely for Philly, because they fell apart the second half of the season in large part that people were just throwing all over them. But yeah, I mean, you think about Brian Branch, the young, pick last year for Detroit, Jack Campbell, the young pick. I mean, that's a young defense. Aiden Hutchinson's only, entering year 3. So they've got a lot of young, talented playmakers all across that defense. And to add 2 more to that secondary, you're right. I mean, how are you going to contend with Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, and DJ Moore? How are you going to deal with the wealth of receivers that Green Bay has? Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. Yeah, this is a must for Detroit. And I agree. Same with Eagles too. So
if you're, I wanted to include both of them because again, the whole of the draft, the rest of their picks could be crap or not. But, and maybe all 4 of these guys end up flaming out. You never know. It's a crapshoot. But
yeah, absolutely.
These 2 teams they each are playoff teams that should be both back in playoff contention, winning their division contention this year. And they both said to themselves, we have one giant hole. And they just absolutely attacked it.
Hammered it.
And they both ended up with prospects we really, really like and could see all 4 of those guys being quality starters. Some of them maybe even being Tyron Arnold, and Quinyon Mitchell maybe even being, like Pro Bowlers, like lockdown corners. So huge for two really, really solid NFL teams and rosters that should be competing next year.
I'm going to go to a team for my third choice. This is a team that is in the losers category.
Okay.
In terms of how I view their draft class as a whole. And on top of that, this is a team that did address their biggest hole with their first round pick, but it's a team I just didn't like the pick, and they didn't have very many. That's the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, agreed.
I've thought more about this because
you agree with my take that the Raiders will make the playoffs before the Broncos?
I think it's getting much more likely. I don't know. The obvious advantage that Denver has is Sean Payton versus we don't know yet what Antonio Pierce can bring to the Raiders long term. But what we saw from him was pretty good. And, we'll talk about the Raiders later on. They're one of my teams here too that I picked to call out. But it's very plausible. And my thing was, Denver actually had in totality more picks than I actually thought. I thought they only had like 4 picks for this draft, but they ended up having 7 picks. But the problem was their first 2 picks were, the first was first round and third round, and then that's it. I mean, so all of their picks then were 4, 5, and 7. And look, I just didn't really like the route that they went throughout this draft, and I didn't like that first pick. My initial reaction to it was, okay, well, they need a quarterback, and if they're feeling good about a quarterback, then go get them. Sean Payton, like, if you can't make it work with Sean Payton and his system, then I don't know where you're going to work out. But at the same token, now the more that I've thought about it, you're a team that is obviously in complete dire straits when it comes to the cap situation and to holes on your team. If they really weren't able to find a willing trade partner for number 12, then I think they did themselves a disservice by going and taking
the 6th quarterback off the board.
Quarterback off the board. I mean, you're pick 12 and you're taking the 6th player at a position. Now, in all fairness, maybe Denver had Bo Nix as their 3rd best quarterback on their board. I'm skeptical of that. I'm not so sure. We don't know better than the coaching staffs, but I'm just saying, like, a lot of people analyze these things and nobody had Bo Nix in the top 3 quarterback prospect. So it did feel like we need a quarterback. We just got to take a guy. They could have taken Brock Bowers. They could have taken, an elite prospect that was just sitting there right for the taking with so many players on the board in a team that has so many needs and so many losses too. And recently, I mean, they lost a wide receiver in their wide receiver room. They lost a middle linebacker. I mean, Cooper DeJean would have been great here because Justin Simmons, is on the block being able to sign with another team. I don't understand a lot of this. And so to take a quarterback of his caliber at number 12, it was questionable. Now, if Bo Nix 3 years down the road ends up being a Pro Bowl quarterback, I will eat my words.
Exactly. Me too. Me too.
But honestly, the only pick I liked was Troy Franklin in the 4th round. I thought that was decent value for the Oregon wide receiver and fills a need for them.
And giving Bo Nix some, like giving him a comfort and what I mean? Somebody he's played with.
Like pair him with his college teammate for sure. But yeah, man, I don't know. It was just like you had a 1st and a 3rd rounder, and then the rest is kind of, total toss-ups when it comes to the NFL draft. It's already hard enough to nail a 1st rounder. Don't want to make it more complicated by taking the 6th best player at his position, or even the 4th best player at his position at that spot.
If you truly believe that Sean Payton can turn Bo Nix into Drew Brees 2.0, then more power to you. And if it actually happens, I will eat crow, like you said. But I 100% agree. I said it on Friday's show. Denver, to me, had the worst round 1. People were all up in arms about Atlanta. No. Atlanta's going to probably make the playoffs this year. And Michael Penix Jr., if and when he ever does start, has way more to work with right now than Bo Nix does in Denver, offensively and defensively. And he's in a division with Bryce Young, Baker Mayfield, and Derek Carr. Bo Nix now is in a division with the 3-time Super Bowl champion, the next GOAT in Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, who is arguably the most talented player at the position in the league, who now has an insane person as his head coach in Jim Harbaugh. And you have a Raiders team that I think overall as a roster has a better roster than Denver right now. And they have an adult at the quarterback position who almost led Indy to the playoffs last year with a very weak roster in Gardner Minshew. Like, don't sleep on Gardner Minshew being able to win games for the Raiders. I don't sleep on it at all, especially in Luke Getsy's system. I just watched Luke Getsy's system for the last 2 years. Now, Luke Getsy wants is just like accurate, get the ball out quickly, and get the ball into your playmakers' hands. And they have playmakers in Mayer, in Brock Bowers, in Devontae Adams. So, listen, Denver, to me, I said it all offseason. Sean Payton should put his pride aside. He loves to talk to media. Go out and just say it. Yeah, we're into such a hole. Just rebuild. If they would have committed to a tank and just used this draft to get as much depth and as much players as possible, and then roll out this season with Zach Wilson and only have won 4 or 5 games, they'd be sitting really pretty for Sean Payton to maybe be able to draft 1 or 2, the top quarterback next year, and then Sean Payton gets his guy, and then let the mad scientist go. Now the cocky Sean Payton has to make Bo Nix work, because if he can't make Bo Nix work, it only hurts his legacy, because they'd be like, all right, so is it Drew Brees was just that good, or is it Sean Payton? Because we give a lot of it 50-50, Drew Brees and Sean Payton, like we did Bill Belichick and Tom Brady. We never got to see a Brees without Payton. But we're getting to see Payton without Brees, and it was so in New Orleans when Brees left. Remember, there was a lot of 7 and 9 years in there with Drew Brees, even though you're throwing for 5,000 yards. And Russell Wilson was an utter disaster, and you were hired to come in and fix him. You couldn't, and now you have Bo Nix.
And you took the job. So, like, you're saying, like, it didn't work out with Russell, but you took the job with Russell. You chose there.
So. He's a cocky guy. If I was a Denver fan, I'd be pretty frustrated. What happens if Bo Nix looks like hot garbage all next year? Maybe that's the best thing for them. Then they go, listen, we swung, we missed, we're drafted top 3, we're taking a quarterback again. But again, that hurts Peyton's legacy. It does. Because you were cocky enough to draft him 6 overall. This team should have tanked. They should have tanked. And good luck. Good luck with Bo Nix in that division against Herbert and Mahomes. I don't see it at all for Denver.
Well, and here's something that's telling, too, with this whole thing. And I've seen a lot of it when talking about the Bo Nix pick, about the first thing mentioned by a lot of these outlets is, well, he's the most accurate passer in NCAA history.
Great.
He's super accurate. He completes 70% of his passes.
Great.
The getting a quarterback to work is a total crapshoot, as we've talked about.
Yeah.
In the NFL. So what you have to draft on, what we've learned over the years, is you have to bet on traits and hope that it translates and that it works out. And leadership obviously plays a role in that too. Josh Allen completed 55% of his passes in college. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Patrick Mahomes had accuracy issues. Lamar Jackson had accuracy issues. These are the best quarterbacks in the NFL because they all had elite traits that were talked about. When the number one and top thing
only elite trait
about Bo Nix is that he was accurate. Well, that is very good. Obviously, you want that. That is a trait. But the fact that his stat of 70% completion percentage doesn't tell the whole story, because it's about a system too that you're in. It's about the competition.
And he was in college for 8 years. I mean, he's older than everyone else. By the time he got that stat up, he'd already seen it all. I mean, this is a dude who made his first start at Oregon with Auburn against Oregon in 2018. Like, I mean, it's a long time. And so I'm with you, Dan. Good luck to Denver. Good luck to him. I hope if you're a Broncos fan, listen, you're frustrated right now. Like, I hope it's all wrong. It's the same thing with Atlanta. if it works out and he's a star, then it works out. But you're banking a lot on Sean Payton, and Sean Payton, I thought he would hold more cachet in the organization to sit there and be like, listen, we need to tank for a year, and I need to then either go get a veteran quarterback, or we need to be able to have the number one choice of quarterback next year. And we can sell that we need to tank for a year because we're just trying to recoup from this Russell Wilson thing. Now, you are paying Bo Nix first-round quarterback money when you're already paying Russell Wilson's contract. It's just, it's dumb. It's dumb. It's dumb.
It's icky.
Yeah. All right. I am going to the monsters of the Midway, the Chicago Bears. You knew they would show up on this.
Of course, they have to be on here.
Yeah. And they deserve it because of picks number 1 and picks number 9. Like that alone, they deserve it.
And only 5 picks, and they were all pretty good.
And I really actually love what they did. Let me talk about Kieran from Yale, the tackle. Emagaji.
Yeah.
He is a suburban Chicago kid whose Twitter was blowing up.
That's cool.
His Twitter was blowing up after he got drafted because this dude has been a Bears fan his whole life. And he has tweets like Nick Foles is a god during the Nick Foles run. Like he's a diehard Bears fan. And he is a absolute monster, like a physical monster. The Bears have their 2 tackles set in Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright. Kieran could come in and be a swing tackle, guard depth. He translates very well to a guard too in the NFL with his size and his speed. Extremely smart out of Yale. Extremely smart kid. Diehard Bears fan. So I think he's going to wear that pride. Like he apparently told Matt Eberflus, him and his dad were golfing at a country club in Chicago last summer, and they were paired up with Matt Eberflus on like a random at the country club. And he told Matt Eberflus, I'm going to play for you in the Chicago Bears. And there's a really great phone call. And Matt Eberflus, you told me, you're right. And we can't wait to have you. This is more than a homegrown kid did they give a flyer to as an undrafted. He's an extremely talented kid who played in the Ivy League. Who's got tons of traits and upside. So I love that pick at 3. Because again, it's offensive line depth and a kid who's gonna bleed making this roster and being as good as he can be. And he's ungodly intelligent, being from Yale. Torrey Taylor from Iowa. This kid is the Andrew Luck, Caleb Williams, Trevor Lawrence of punters. I know it's crazy to take a punter in the 4th round, but someone was going to take this kid in rounds 4 or 5. That's Peter Schrager. All these people have been listening to said, yeah, people are laughing at the team that did it who don't know ball. This kid was going to be drafted in the 4th or 5th round. There was even talks about him going in the 3rd round. The Bears go out and get this guy. The Bears had one of the worst punting situations in the NFL the last 2 years. They were dreadful at punter. Gill was awful. You hope to not have to punt, but you know what helps a young defense and a defense that is still got some holes? An incredible punter who pins the guys back. He's from Australia. He's one of those type of guys, played at Iowa, so he's got a lot of practice. He was their best weapon by far at Iowa. So I love that. And trading back into the draft this year to get in the 5th round, Austin Booker from Kansas, 6'5", 240. Now, Booker only started 1 game, okay? And that's a little concerning. But all the measurables and everything that you saw, he actually recorded an incredible amount of quarterback hurries and sacks for not starting. And everything that you see on tape and from the Senior Bowl and everything else, it's one of those moments where you're like, oh. This kid is still just scratching the potential. And that's what you say. Hey, Eberflus, there's a guy. Go learn from Montez Sweat. You don't need him to start right away. But if he could develop into something special, he's got all of the physical traits to develop into a potential stud, and that you found in the 5th round. And they must have been as convinced with him as possible to trade into and give up a pick next year to go get this guy this year. Yeah. So I give him credit again. All you have to say is Caleb and Rome. The Bears did the right thing. They are a quote unquote winner of this draft because of Caleb and Rome.
They very well might be the winner. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I agree with everything that you said there. And also I'll add the addition of Torrey Taylor also is a big help to a young quarterback because if Caleb does hit rough patches, which you expect any rookie quarterback to do that, the last thing they need is for that problem or that issue or that rough series or 6 series in a game to be compounded by the fact that your team can't then pin the other team deep and give your defense a shot at holding them and getting the ball back for your young quarterback and getting your quarterback then the ball at midfield versus getting the ball constantly in the shadow of their own end.
I will say,
in a roundabout way, it's very helpful to the young quarterback too.
Remember, the return rules changed as well. And Cairo Santos, who the Bears have locked up, who's a great field goal kicker and an extra point kicker. And I love having Kairos as a kicker, especially in Chicago with the win. He knows how to handle it. It wouldn't shock me if throughout training camp, the Bears are saying to this kid, Tory Taylor, figure out a way to be our kickoff guy. And can you find a way to get that ball to stop dead like you do as a punter? So they forced returns, because the NFL, remembers, forcing more returns to pin guys back as deep and as unique as possible. Just keep your eye out for that. It could be a thing that they look to do to maybe say, hey, we're going to use this luxury as we have a great kicker that we trust on extra points and field goals. Maybe we're going to use this kid as that kickoff weapon as well. Just keep an eye out for it. I'm just saying.
It's very interesting. Yeah. That was an element that I didn't think about, but that's certainly in play. All right. Another team, another winner for me. The rest are going to be winners. 2 left. I'm going to go with the Vegas Raiders. We alluded to it.
I like it, Dan.
What I liked most about the Raiders draft was that it was the most, we kind of talked about this in our Friday recap of the first round. It was the patient, very sober thinking process that they went through. They didn't panic at any moment. They didn't reach for guys. They sat back. They let the draft come to them. And what did they end up with, especially in the first 3 picks? I think all 3 very quality starter-capable guys right out of the gate, especially Brock Bowers and Jackson Powers-Johnson. Those 2 guys should be day 1 starters for them. I just loved it. The Raiders were probably in a situation where they were ready to take a Michael Penix or, heck, maybe even a Bo Nix at 13. I'm not sure. But when all 6 quarterbacks are off the board, the Raiders had to pivot. And it didn't take them long. They had to turn left and look at the board and say, oh, Brock Bowers is sitting there. He's the best, one of the top 5 overall talent in the draft. We'll go take him. Yeah, we have a tight end. We're going to run 12 personnel a lot. We're going to find Brock Bowers a way to get involved. And then when we do get our quarterback of the future, he's going to have plenty of weapons to work with. And we're going to have a more grown-up football team in terms of being ready and able to contend with the likes of their division. So Delmar Glaze, a really good offensive tackle too, in a great class, probably got pushed down. What was much more likely a mid-second round type of talent. But because the class was so good, he got pushed out. So I loved those picks. And then just taking stabs at different positions, getting a couple corners in there, which is a big need for the Raiders. And then they get a safety too. So 3 defensive backs late in the draft. And then to get a running back out of New Hampshire. I don't know much about him, but just getting that position, because that's certainly a need now that they have had to say goodbye to Josh Jacobs. I just liked it all around. I thought it was really good and a grown-up big boy draft from the Las Vegas Raiders.
Absolutely. And if the Raiders, remember, even if Gardner Minshew, wins 7 or 8 games with them this year and they fall to the middle of the first round, they, in next year's draft, it doesn't mean that they couldn't find a way to get up and get a quarterback. Sure, so many teams now, you look around and you say, who really needs to draft a quarterback next year?
Yeah.
The Raiders are kind of like the last team that you can think of off the top of your head. Maybe the Giants, Seattle are going to fall into that, but it's way less amount of teams than it was this year. Yeah. And I think the Raiders let their division rival take a bullet for them. And I agree with you 100%. Remember,
I think that is something that we need to talk about on a future episode too, because I was thinking about that question. And I was like, oh, there's going to be barely any. And I still agree. There's fewer quarterback needy teams going into next year. But that being said, there's still more than I thought. Like, I got up to like 7 teams because we don't know what the Cowboys are going to do. We don't know what
we don't know what the Jets with the health of Aaron Rodgers, Miami.
Pittsburgh could use so there are a lot of teams that could find themselves in the position to need a quarterback pretty quickly next year. The Giants. There's several, but I agree. Like, the Raiders will at least have ammo to be able to move it. They could move a Max Crosby if they needed to. They could move off of a Devontae Adams and package him with something to move up if they needed to. But look, they went and got guys that they felt were at the very top available, and I think that's what you got to do when the board falls the way it did.
I 100% think the Raiders are going to win more games than the Broncos this year. I'm firmly in that, and I think maybe off the top of your head you might think that's crazy, but I think if you really look at it, something we both agree on. All right, I'm going to go to my one bad in the NFC, and no, I'm not going to the Atlanta Falcons. I'm not. One bad team I'm going to in the NFC. She got a new man on the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings.
Oh, all right.
You could argue, well, wait, Mark, no. They got 2 first-rounders. Well, I think their quarterback they got in the first round has got a lot of question marks, and he's the one quarterback, I'd argue, beyond Caleb Williams, that legitimately has a ton of pressure in year one. No pressure on Jane Daniels year one. No pressure on Drake May year one. Now, you don't want to be awful, but the pressure, no one is saying Washington making the playoffs. No one's saying New England making the playoffs. The most pressure for a quarterback year one, obviously whoever's in the number 1 pick, but I'd argue.
I don't know, though, because he's not starting out of the gate, though, right? I mean, we don't think he is.
But he might. We don't know how it's going to go.
You're right.
And he's got the pressure of, no, dude. You have the best 2 wide receivers, number 1, number 2 wide receiver. You're the number 1 wide receiver in the league. And you have a very capable top 5 tight end in the league. You have an offensive coach. If Caleb Williams stinks, the Bears go, listen, defensive coach, Eberflus is gone, like blah, blah, blah. You have an offensive coach. Yeah. You have Jordan Addison. You have Justin Jefferson. So a lot of pressure on this kid. He also was the 5th quarterback taken in the draft. I like Dallas Turner a lot. I really do. But then the Vikings gave up a lot that they didn't pick again until 4. And then you get a corner in Kyrie Jackson, Oregon, who's a nice prospect. But again, that's, hopeful for a team that really needed a starting corner. Are you going to guarantee that the 4th rounder out of Oregon is like, that's the guy we want to start against Amon-Ra St. Brown and DJ Moore in that division? I don't know. They got to
wait 2 rounds again.
And then they had to wait 2 rounds again, not to pick to the 6th. And all of the guys after that, I mean, one of them was a kicker they took out of Alabama.
Yeah.
And then you got a couple offensive linemen, but this is a Minnesota team that going into the draft, and I now still believe firmly after the draft, had the worst roster in the NFC North going into it, still has the worst roster in the NFC North coming out of it. Now, you got your quarterback, but your quarterback is a guy that a lot of people were not sold on, ourselves included, and now he's going to a place where it's kind of like, hey, bud, no reason not to get the ball to Justin Jefferson and get the ball to Jordan Addison, and you got TJ Hawkinson, and you have a great offensive-minded head coach. Like, pressure's on. Like, you got the win. Like, how long will the Vikings fans deal with if McCarthy starts by week 4 or 5, and he's airballing Justin Jefferson, and Justin Jefferson doesn't look happy on the sidelines? Whoo! That's a tough situation. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm just saying pump the brakes on Minnesota. I didn't like that they gave up so much. They needed a quarterback and an edge rusher. I love the edge rusher they got, and I think getting him at 17 is good value for Turner. But you took the 5th best quarterback in the draft, and as opposed to just, hey, let's run a year. Let's just play a year with Sam Darnold and let it play out, and then probably be in a great spot to go get a top 3 quarterback next year. They forced it, and now it feels like there's a lot of pressure on J.J. McCarthy. How can he not be considered the 4th best quarterback in this division right now? I think he is, until proven otherwise, and he's got a lot of pressure. So
yeah, it's a good point. It's well taken, and I agree. Like and
the rest of their draft is like, I mean, they got 2 players basically.
Right. Their quality of picks were really.
You'll be lucky if you're Minnesota if you hit on a starter from in the rest of those picks.
Yep. That's a tough situation to put yourself in. My final team is, as I mentioned, going to be a winner as well, and this is West Coast team. We're going to the LA Chargers.
I like it.
I love what the Chargers did here, especially early. I loved their first 3 picks. Joe Alt was the consensus. Don't overthink this. Go get the tackle. Get your bookends for Justin Herbert. And then to turn around and get support for him in a Ladd McConkey, who could be a reliable third down type of receiver. And you hope the rest works out with the other guys, because they didn't take a wide receiver until Brendan Rice. But I thought Brendan Rice in the 7th round. I was like, at that point, that seems like a really solid pick. I mean, I thought he was
and Johnson out of Michigan, the late wide receiver there out of Michigan too. A Harbaugh guy comes into his system.
Absolutely, yeah. Work with your former head coach once again, and Junior Colson, really quality linebacker, and obviously nobody knows him better than Jim Harbaugh himself. And then just kind of rounding out the defense in those middle rounds. I think once again there's some glaring needs for this team were secondary, interior defensive line, wide receiver, and quarterback. I'm sorry, not quarterback, offensive line. And so they attacked all of those needs, and they got multiple of those positions too. They got 3 wide receivers in this draft. And so if, you hope one of those 3 wide receivers likely hits, then that's good. Then that's a good thing. And same with corner, and they get their D tackle in the 4th round too. I thought it was a well-rounded attack here. They built out from the trenches, while also helping out Justin Herbert with some weapons that could really turn into some stars. And Brendan Rice is one of those guys that really could become something big, especially for a 7th rounder. I was kind of surprised he fell that far, but yeah, good on them. And we'll see what they do with the running back position moving forward too. They only got one in the 6th round there from Troy, but that's a position where you get guys undrafted late rounds all the time that turn out to be good running backs. So really like the move. I'm not worried about Harbaugh. It feels like a running back is part of a system. Like he'll find the right guy. Maybe this kid out of Troy is someone that he may have recruited. Who even knows? Yeah. Well, you want to know why I love the Chargers draft? Look at the schools that Harbaugh drafted from. Yeah. Notre Dame, Georgia, Michigan, Alabama, Maryland, Notre Dame, Troy, but then USC, Michigan. He just went like these 2 are out big, of Michigan, 2 out of Notre Dame, and just like big schools, big recruits, big bodies. That kid out of Alabama, the D tackle Eboji, I can't think of his name. Yeah, I know his name. He's massive. Justin Eboji, but he's just a massive human. And you're like, oh, okay, Harbaugh, big dudes, big bodies, Harbaugh. I have one honorable mention I want to quickly mention. I know we're running long here. I want to quickly mention. I want to give them a shout out because we've been very, very critical of them. We gave them a shout out on Friday. And I think now that I see the rest of their draft, kind of unfurl, give them a shout out. I think Carolina deserves a shout out. It all is going to come down to Bryce Young and being good, right? And their new head coach, like getting the most out of Bryce Young. But they went in 3 of their first 4 picks. Leggett out of South Carolina, the wide receiver, like that for them. And then you get Brooks, the number 1 running back in this draft in the 2nd round out of Texas. And then in the 4th round, pick number 1 in the 4th round, you get the number 2 ranked tight end on ESPN's big board out of Texas, Sanders. He's a big target, 6'4", 245. You say to yourself, all right, with 3 of our first 4 picks, we got you a stud wide receiver who can come in and be a great complement number 2 to Deontay Johnson, who also is like a hometown kid who's going to like bleed like Panther blue. You go get the number 1 running back in the draft, big body, Jonathan Brooks out of Texas, who could be a steal. Yeah. And then the Texas tight end, who is the number 2 ranked prospect in that tight end prospect, and you get him at the top of the 4th round. That is 3 of the 4 saying we're going to give Bryce Young some added weapons. They already addressed the offensive line in the offseason.
I'm not saying Bryce Young, no excuses, but for the love of God, they're throwing him a bone, right? They're throwing him a bone and they're giving him a chance. So I wanted to give Carolina a shout out.
Yeah, no, I like that. I was a little lukewarm on Carolina, but I like the fact that at least what they did in their draft showed what they're trying to do, which is support Bryce Young and try and make this work as best as they can, because they had limited resources. Next year, no second rounder as well, and thankfully you will be probably breathing a sigh of relief after next year that, okay, that trade is behind us entirely now and we are moving forward.
Bryce Young is going to get all of this. He's going to get all of this year, right? Like you're going to give him, and he will most likely get all of year 3 too, right? Like he will go into year 3 unless this year is such a disaster and that they're picking number 1 or top of the draft again. Then you can move off of Bryce Young, right? Like, but if you end up with like pick 8 or 9, you can make the argument we're going to roll with Bryce Young one more year. Then we can make the decision on whether we're moving on from him or not. But it's a big year. Now, Deontay Johnson, Xavier Legette, you give him a Jonathan Brooks, like, all right, you spend $100 million on guards.
Be their starting running back, I would imagine. Miles Sanders had a rough year last year.
Yeah.
Chuba Hubbard, like that's their depth right now. Brooks is probably going to be their starter.
You spend $100 million the offseason on guards. Like, all right, okay, this offense now should be able to be competitive, should be able to move the ball. Remember how many times last year they didn't even score a point? Like, and they, Bryce Young was 9 for 22 for 100. It's like, you can't, they've done enough for me to say, all right, it's got to be better. It's got to be better. You bring in a new young offensive coach, it's got to be better.
Yeah, and first draft under Dan Morgan, his hands were, kind of strapped to begin with. So I do think they did a pretty solid job, all things considered. We'll see how it plays out in the NFL season. We'll see how all of these picks pan out. Maybe we look like idiots come 2 years from now, but
of course,
that's the nature of what we do, talking about football on a week-to-week basis, especially in the offseason. That's how it goes, and it's a fun exercise too to kind of look at all of these drafts and see what pans out, and hoping that some of these 5th, 6th rounders, like every year, that we didn't know anything about or didn't even highlight here, end up being stars or great quality players. So that's the fun of it. It's a crapshoot, and they are prospects until they become realities in terms of on the field superstars. So exciting to look at that. We didn't even talk about David Tepper's run in with.
Oh God, what an idiot!
Restaurant.
I feel bad for Panthers fans, man.
It's terrible, man. It's terrible.
Your owner, I would be going off every day on McCaskey if he did something dumb like that. But I give George McCaskey a lot of credit. I actually met him on a Wendell boat tour one time. He's a man of the people. He wears his Bear stuff. He listens to it. He'd take a lot of crap. Be like, I know. I want to be able to win. I'm trying. They're just pathetic, but they're not a-holes like Tepper.
Yeah. Well, there's a bit of a hubris involved too when you think that you can throw money at everything and solve all of the problems.
He can't do that. Though. He can't.
No, you need to be able to evaluate and make hires on top of it. That'll do it for us here on the Football Lounge with Mark and Dan, our post-draft analysis, and we'll be back with plenty of more exciting draft discussions and preseason talk soon enough, the schedule release, all of that stuff that we alluded to earlier. But that will do it for us for the time being. We are part of the For Frequency's Sake podcast network. Appreciate you watching, and check out all of the other shows on the network. ForFantasySakeQC.com is the website to go look at what all of these shows are churning out on a daily and weekly basis. We will see you next time, folks. Take care.